Hello! In this video, we're going to look a little bit at a paper that's not such a good paper. So, to believe is a choice. Religion, the freedom to believe in what you want. In The Will to Believe by William James, he mainly talks about how there is such a lack of evidence to believe in something that contains no hard, solid evidence of it existing. Is that an easy to understand sentence? Do you know what it means? It's not so easy, right? Why? It's long, it's complex. And what I think it means is James talks about how he talks about how there's such a lack of evidence for believing certain things that maybe we don't have enough evidence to believe in them. This second part is kind of repeating the first part. It's confusing. And what's something? What's the it that we're talking about? I mean, you and I know probably it's God, but it would be nice to know that, James mainly talks about how there's a lack of evidence to believe in God. That's at least a lot easier to understand than this long, repetitive sentence that is sort of also abstract. In this article, James lectures about the lack of enough evidence for the religious truth. Okay, so this is easier to understand, but it seems like it's sort of repetitive, and it could still be more concrete. The religious truth, which one? That God exists. To argue the argument in depth of, quote, some should believe in God because it is good for them to believe in God, unquote, people should have the freedom of believing in what they choose to. Okay, so this is a little clunky to argue the argument, but, it's fairly clear that, okay, according to this person, what James is saying is that we should have the freedom to believe in what we choose to believe in. Is that what James is saying? Maybe. Well, no, it's not, but at least it's fairly clear what the sentence means. Lack of evidence that William James has spoken of tends to be enough evidence as to why human begin spell check doesn't catch all errors, just like we saw in the other paper with intermediately and immediately. You need to read the paper to catch all the errors. So the lack of evidence that William James has spoken of tends to be enough evidence as to why human beings should take into consideration, why they should take a second thought about believing in something that doesn't have enough physical evidence of its existence. Really, again, hard to understand sentence. Not that we can't figure it out, but it's not easy like the other one is, right? I think it's just saying, in many cases, according to James, we don't have enough evidence to believe in something. That's a lot simpler than saying all of this. You might think, oh, why is this person writing like this? Maybe because this was written at the last minute and they needed to get the word counted, so they end up saying this repetitive stuff? As human beings, we are immune to always wanting the truth or questioning the non-existence. So if we're immune to always wanting the truth, then sometimes we don't want the truth. If we're immune to always questioning the non-existence, then sometimes we don't question the non-existence. Is that what the person means? I'm not sure. Again, it's confusing. My point of view is that there is no sufficient evidence to back up the statement of some should believe in God due to the lack of evidence. Okay, this should probably be a period because this is a new sentence. This person says, there is not sufficient evidence to back up the statement of some should believe in God. That, no problem. But maybe they mean, no, this whole thing, some should believe in God due to the lack of evidence, that's not true? Is that what they mean? The sentence is hard to understand. Do they mean, what is there not? Well, they're saying there's something that there's not sufficient evidence for. What, right? There's something there's not sufficient evidence for. What is there not sufficient evidence for? That some should believe in God, or there's not sufficient evidence that some should believe in God due to the lack of evidence. I don't know. Premise 1, there is no valid evidence of God's existence. Premise 2, if no valid evidence, God does not exist. Conclusion, God does not exist. This is not James's argument, so that's an error. So this paper just continues in this vein. This is not a good paper. There are all these long, hard to understand, repetitive sentences, so the writing is not good. And the the account of James's argument, and this argument does not accurately state that the paper does not accurately state what James's argument is. So that's another problem. And then the other thing is if we read through this paper, what happens is the person says, okay, here's a sentence from James. It is wrong always, everywhere, for everyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. This sentence isn't James, but if we remember our James, this is a sentence that James is criticizing. This person then treats it as if it were a sentence that James believes. So that's a mistake, but in any case, they say, okay, here's a sentence I found in James, and then they talk about it for a little while. And then they say, here's another sentence from James. And then they talk about that sentence for a little while. And then they say, here's another sentence from James. And then they talk about that for a little while. And then they say, here's another sentence from James. And then they talk about that for a little while. It's like a book report. It just sort of says, oh, here's a sentence, and then here's another sentence, and then here's another sentence. And it sort of flows along, and there's first one thing is said, and then another thing is said, and they're sort of all kind of, like you can see, okay, the first one is sort of related to the second, and the second one is sort of related to the third. But if you step back, and if you read this paper, what you'll see is that while it kind of feels like, oh yeah, I'm moving from one thing to another and they're related, you step back and think, well, where am I in terms of what's happening in this paper? Like, it's just a whole bunch of sort of related stuff, but I don't know how it all fits together. It's like I got on a train and I went somewhere, but I don't really know how I got there or how to get back or how this part is related to that part. So if you'll read this paper, what you'll see is that the writing is not very good, as we've already seen from that first paragraph. It just continues in that vein. And it's not very accurate about what James says, but it's also not very well organized, because we just sort of like, here are my thoughts about one thing that James says. Here are my thoughts about another thing that James says. Here are my thoughts about another thing that James says. And it's all kind of related, but it's not organized. It's just riffing on different, just commenting on different sentences in James. That's not good organization. It's confusing. But it can kind of feel like it's good organization because it's all sort of about the same stuff. But once you start trying to see how does it all fit together, it just sort of falls apart. So this is an example of a not well organized paper. And this paper was probably written very much at the last minute. It's why there's all these repetitive long sentences that are hard to understand, why it's inaccurate, and why it's not well organized. So you want to avoid writing a paper like this. You want to write a paper that's easy to understand, that's accurate. And the way to do that is to get started on your paper early, and then you will be writing it at the last minute. And that we're going to have a bunch of time for you to get started on your paper. You don't need to get started on it right away, not for this module. But once we get going with the different parts of writing the paper, you're going to want to get rolling with that so that you're not ending up writing it late at night, the night before it's due, and ending up writing a not so well organized, not so well written, not so accurate paper. Okay, so that's an example of a bad paper, and you can look at that paper at more length if you want.